In the serene village of Umuagu, life moved at a steady, comforting pace. The village thrived on its traditions and deep connection to nature. The people of Umuagu were proud of their heritage, and their days were filled with farming, trading, and telling stories that celebrated their rich culture. On the outskirts of this peaceful village lived a young girl named Adana, who was the pride of her family and admired by all who knew her. Adana was known for her stunning beauty, with her smooth, glowing skin and eyes that sparkled like sunlight on water. But it wasn't just her looks that made her stand out. Her kind and gentle nature endeared her to everyone. Whether it was helping an elderly neighbor carry firewood or soothing a crying child, Adana's kindness seemed to know no bounds. Adana lived with her parents in a modest clay hut surrounded by a small garden where her mother grew vegetables and herbs. Her father, Okechukwu, was a hard-working farmer, respected in the community for his honesty and wisdom. Though he spoke little, his actions always spoke louder than words, earning him the admiration of the villagers. Her mother, Chinwe, had once been the most beautiful woman in Umuagu. In her youth, many suitors had traveled great distances to seek her hand in marriage. Warriors, wealthy traders, and even the village chief's son had all been captivated by Chinwe's beauty and grace. But she chose Okechukwu, a man of modest means but noble heart, who treated her with respect and love. Their home, though simple, was filled with warmth and laughter. Chinwe often sang as she cooked, her voice carrying through the garden, while Okechukwu would hum quietly as he repaired tools or prepared yams for planting. Adana, their only child, was the light of their lives, and they raised her to value kindness, humility, and the traditions of their people. The village of Umuagu itself was alive with stories and customs passed down through generations. The people believed in the presence of spirits in the forest and the sacredness of nature. The villagers respected the unseen forces that governed their lives, often visiting the local dibia, the spiritual healer, for guidance and blessings. As the sun set each day, children would gather to hear elders recount tales of bravery, love, and caution. It was in this environment, surrounded by tradition and wisdom, that Adana grew up, blossoming into a girl whose beauty and kindness would one day lead her to an extraordinary destiny. The forest near Umuagu was a place of both beauty and mystery. Tall trees stretched toward the sky, their leaves forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into golden beams. Birds sang, and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze created a calming melody. Adana often ventured into the forest to gather firewood for her family, staying close to the familiar paths that her mother had warned her never to stray from. One sunny afternoon, Adana tied her scarf securely around her head and picked up her basket, ready for her usual trip to the forest. She greeted her mother, Chinwe, who was peeling yams outside their hut. "Adana, don't forget what I always tell you," Chinwe said, her voice calm but firm. "The forest is not just trees and animals. Respect it and stay on the safe paths." "I will, Mama," Adana replied with a reassuring smile. "I'll be back soon." The forest was alive with the sounds of nature as Adana walked along the winding path. She hummed a soft tune, the melody blending with the rhythm of the forest. As she bent down to pick a bundle of dry sticks, a strange glimmer caught her eye from the underbrush. She froze, her breath hitching in her throat. There, coiled on the ground, was a large python. Its scales shimmered in the sunlight like polished bronze, giving it an almost ethereal glow. Adana's heart raced as she stared at the snake. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. She had heard stories of Ek Emma, the sacred python, but never imagined she would come face to face with one. The snake lifted its head slowly, its dark eyes meeting hers. Adana felt a strange mixture of fear and calm wash over her. She wanted to run, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. For what felt like an eternity, they stared at each other. Then, without warning, the snake lowered its head and slithered away into the thick bushes. Adana stood motionless, her body trembling. When she finally gathered the courage to move, she abandoned the rest of her firewood and ran home as fast as her legs could carry her. Bursting into the family's hut, she found her parents inside. Chinwe was pounding yam in the mortar while Okechukwu sharpened his machete. They both looked up in alarm as Adana stumbled in, her face pale and her breathing heavy. "Adana, what happened?" Chinwe asked, dropping the pestle and rushing to her daughter's side. I saw it," Adana stammered, still shaking. "A big snake. Its scales shone like gold and it was staring at me." Okechukwu frowned but remained calm. "Did it harm you?" he asked. "No," Adana replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "It just looked at me and left." Chinwe pulled Adana into a comforting embrace. "You're safe now, my child. Sometimes the forest shows us things we don't understand. Be thankful it did not harm you." Her father nodded. "The python is a sacred creature. If it meant no harm, it might have been a sign. But you must always be careful in the forest, Adana." That night, Adana lay on her mat, unable to shake the memory of the snake's piercing gaze. Her parents' words had soothed her, but deep inside, she felt there was more to this encounter than met the eye. In the days that followed, the snake appeared again. This time, it was when Adana was fetching water from the stream. As she knelt by the water's edge, a group of young boys startled her, teasing her playfully. Suddenly, the snake emerged from the nearby bushes, its presence silencing the boys instantly. They fled, leaving Adana unharmed. From that day forward, the snake became a strange but constant presence in Adana's life. Whenever she found herself in danger or trouble, it would appear, quietly warding off harm and then vanishing as mysteriously as it came. Adana began to feel both protected and unsettled, unsure why the sacred creature seemed so drawn to her. The village of Umuagu was a close-knit community where news, whether true or exaggerated, spread like wildfire. The tales of Adana and the snake began as small whispers but soon grew into heated discussions at every corner. At first, it was just a few children talking about how the sacred python seemed to follow her. Then, adults started to notice the pattern and question why the snake appeared so often wherever Adana went. Among the loudest voices were Amaka and Adaku, two young women known for their jealousy of Adana. Amaka, tall and proud, had always been envious of Adana's beauty and the attention it garnered. Adaku, shorter and sharper-tongued, was bitter about Adana's kind-hearted nature, which made her beloved by everyone. The two had never been friends with Adana, but her growing popularity and the story surrounding her only deepened their resentment. One afternoon, as a group of women gathered at the stream to wash clothes, Amaka leaned in, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did you hear? They say the python has been following Adana everywhere. She must be controlling it with some kind of dark power." Adaku, eager to add fuel to the fire, chimed in. "Of course she is. How else can you explain it? No normal person would have a snake watching over them like that. Maybe she's an evil child." The other women, who had been quietly listening, exchanged uneasy glances. While many admired Adana's kindness, the idea of her being connected to something as mysterious as the sacred python made them uncomfortable. Superstition ran deep in Umuagu, and even the kindest of souls could fall under suspicion if the wrong stories were told. The rumors soon spread beyond the stream and into the heart of the village. At the market, traders whispered about Adana as they sold their goods. During evening gatherings, elders shook their heads in concern, debating whether the girl's frequent encounters with the snake were a blessing or a curse. "Maybe the snake is protecting her because she's chosen by the spirits," one elder suggested. "Or maybe she has done something to anger the gods," another countered. "We must be careful. This could bring misfortune to the village." For Adana, life became more difficult. She noticed the way people began to look at her differently, their once warm smiles replaced by wary glances. Children, who used to run up to greet her, now kept their distance, clutching their mother's skirts. Even her closest friends seemed hesitant to speak with her, fearing the stigma of associating with someone suspected of being tied to the supernatural. At home, Adana confided in her parents, her voice trembling with frustration. "Mama, Papa, why are they saying these things about me? I have done nothing wrong. The snake just appears. I don't even know why." Chinwe placed a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. "People fear what they do not understand, my child. It is not your fault. The python has not harmed anyone, and neither have you. Stay strong. Okechukwu, sitting quietly by the doorway, finally spoke. Adana, we know your heart and so do the gods. Let the rumors pass. Truth always finds a way to reveal itself. But the words of her parents, though reassuring, could not silence the growing murmurs in the village. Every encounter with the pythons seemed to add to the suspicion, and Amaka and Adaku took every opportunity to stoke the flames. She must be using the snake to scare people, Amaka whispered to a group of young men one evening. Who knows what else she's capable of? If we're not careful, she might bring a curse on the whole village, Adaku added with a sly smile. The villagers began to divide into two groups. Some believed Adana was chosen by the gods and meant no harm, while others were convinced that her connection to the snake was unnatural and dangerous. The tension grew, and Adana felt increasingly isolated. In the quiet of her room, Adana often wondered why the snake kept appearing in her life. Was it truly a sign from the gods, as some believed? Or was there a darker secret waiting to be uncovered? Little did she know, the answers would come sooner than she expected, and they would change everything. Despite the whispers and mistrust that surrounded her, Adana's life carried on. She focused on helping her parents and avoided the gossip that lingered in the village. But amidst the tension, a glimmer of joy appeared in her life. Obina. Obina was everything the young women in Umwagu dreamed of. Tall, with a smooth voice and an easy smile, he was known for his charm and good looks. A skilled hunter, he often returned to the village with impressive catches, earning him respect among the elders and admiration from the youth. When Obina began showing interest in Adana, it caused quite a stir. Of all the girls in the village, he chose Adana. Amaka scoffed when she heard the news. Well, let's see how long this lasts, Adaku added with a smirk. For Adana, Obina's attention was flattering. His warm words and captivating presence made her forget the unease that had taken root in her life. When he approached her parents with gifts and formally declared his intention to marry her, Adana felt a flicker of happiness she hadn't experienced in weeks. Chinwe, ever protective, was cautious. Obina, are you sure of your decision? There have been stories. I do not care for stories, Mama Chinwe, Obina replied confidently. Adana is a good woman, and I wish to make her my wife. Okechukwu nodded approvingly, though he remained silent. Adana, shy but excited, accepted the proposal. The date for the betrothal ceremony was set, and preparations began immediately. The village buzzed with anticipation, curious to see how the union would unfold. On the day of the ceremony, Adana dressed in her finest attire. Her wrapper was a vibrant red, and coral beads adorned her neck and wrists. Chinwe and Okechukwu were proud, though a hint of worry lingered in their eyes. Guests arrived with gifts, and the air was filled with the sound of drums and laughter. Obina, dressed in a hunter's tunic, arrived with his family, bearing yam tubers, palm wine, and kola nuts as part of the traditional offering. The crowd watched with excitement as he approached Adana's family to present his intentions formally. But just as the ceremony reached its peak, a sudden hush fell over the gathering. From the edge of the clearing, the unmistakable hiss of a snake echoed through the air. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the sacred python, Ike Emma, slithered into the center of the celebration. Adana froze, her heart pounding. The snake, its shimmering scales catching the sunlight, moved gracefully among the gathered villagers, heading straight for her. The crowd panicked. Guests scrambled to their feet, some fleeing in terror, while others murmured prayers and called on the gods for protection. Obina's confident demeanor cracked. He stepped back, his face pale. "Why is it here?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "Why does it always follow you, Adana?" "I don't know," Adana whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I never called it. I don't understand." The python paused in front of Adana, its dark eyes locking with hers for a brief moment. Then, as quickly as it had come, it turned and disappeared into the bushes, leaving chaos in its wake. Obina's family gathered around him, urging him to leave. "This is a bad omen," his father muttered. "You must end this now." Obina, still shaken, turned to Adana. His once warm eyes were now cold and distant. "I cannot do this, Adana. There is too much I don't understand about you and this snake. I'm sorry." Before Adana could respond, he and his family walked away, their gifts left abandoned. The drums fell silent, and the villagers stared at her, their eyes filled with suspicion and fear. Chinwe rushed to her daughter's side, pulling her into a protective embrace. "It's all right, my child," she whispered. But Adana could feel the weight of the stares around her. The rejection stung deeply, and the growing mistrust in the village only made it worse. As the sun set that evening, Adana sat outside her family's hut, staring into the distance. The pain of Obina's betrayal cut deep, but the greater hurt came from the realization that her connection to the snake was isolating her from everyone she cared about. The villagers, now more than ever, were convinced that something dark surrounded Adana. Whispers turned into warnings, and mistrust became fear. Adana, heartbroken and confused, knew she had to find answers. She could no longer ignore the presence of the snake in her life, or the growing divide it had created between her and her people. After the heartbreak of her failed betrothal and the rising mistrust in Umuagu, Adana felt she had no choice but to leave the village. At the urging of her parents, she went to stay with her mother's stepsister, Auntie Adaobi, in the neighboring village of Umuaka. Adaobi was a decisive and wise woman who welcomed Adana with open arms. Adana spent her first few days in Umuaka, helping around Adaobi's compound and trying to forget the whispers of Umuagu. But the weight of the snake's presence lingered. One evening, as they sat by the fire, she opened up to her aunt. "Auntie Adaobi," Adana began hesitantly, "there's something I need to tell you." "Go on," Adaobi encouraged, setting aside her basket of vegetables. Adana took a deep breath. "There's a snake, a large python, that keeps appearing in my life. It has followed me for months now. It even disrupted my betrothal ceremony. People in Umuagu think I have dark powers or that I'm cursed. I don't know why this is happening." Adaobi listened intently, her brow furrowed. When Adana finished, her aunt nodded solemnly. "This is no small matter," she said. "I've heard of spirits tying themselves to people, but this is unusual. I will consult the Dibia here in Umuaka. He is wise and may know what to do." The next morning, Adaobi visited the Dibia. When she returned later that day, her face was serious. "The Dibia has spoken," Adaobi said, sitting down with Adana. "He said the snake is a spirit tied to your life. It cannot be ignored. To free you, we must kill the snake. He has given me a special machete and instructions for how to do it." Adana's heart raced at the thought of ending the creature that had saved her life on more than one occasion. But the idea of living under the shadow of suspicion and fear pushed her to agree. "Let's do it," she said, her voice steady. "I will do whatever it takes to be free." After returning to Umuagu, Adaobi wasted no time in meeting with Chinwe and Okachukwu. Adana's parents were alarmed by the Dibia's instructions, but agreed to support the plan. Early the next morning, the four of them set out into the forest to confront the snake. Adaobi carried the gleaming machete blessed by the Dibia, while Adana stayed close behind her. Chinwe and Okachukwu followed silently, their expressions a mixture of worry and determination. The dense forest grew quieter as they ventured deeper, the usual sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves replaced by an eerie stillness. When they reached the clearing where the snake often appeared, Adaobi stopped. She spread the herbs from the Dibia on the ground and muttered an incantation. "Eka Ama, a spirit of the forest," she called, her voice strong. "Show yourself." For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then a loud hiss broke through the air, and the python slithered into view. Its scales shimmered in the sunlight, and its dark eyes locked onto Adana. Chinwe gasped, clutching Okachukwu's arm. "It's beautiful," she whispered, but her voice was tinged with fear. Adaobi raised the machete, her grip firm. "Stay back," she warned Adana and her parents. "The Dibia said this is the only way." The python raised its head, its movements slow and deliberate. Adana, feeling a strange pull, stepped forward. "Auntie, wait," she said. "Let me try to—" "No," Adaobi interrupted sharply. "This is not the time for hesitation." Before Adana could argue, Adaobi swung the machete. The snake hissed loudly, coiling to avoid the blade. Adaobi chased it through the clearing, determined to strike. Adana, in her attempt to help, stumbled forward, and the sharp edge of the machete grazed her hand. "Ow!" Adana cried out, clutching her hand as blood dripped onto the ground and onto the snake's shimmering scales. The moment her blood touched the python, the air in the clearing shifted. A low hum reverberated around them, and the snake froze. Its body trembled as a strange light enveloped it. Chinwe and Okechukwu stepped back, their eyes wide with shock. "What's happening?" Okechukwu asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The snake's body began to change. Its scales dissolved, revealing the figure of a young woman. The light faded, and there, standing in the center of the clearing, was a girl who looked exactly like Adana. Adaobi lowered the machete, her face pale with disbelief. Chinwe covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Adana stared, her heart pounding. Who are you?" Adana asked, her voice trembling. Adana's parents stood at a distance, completely stunned by the unexpected transformation. The clearing fell silent, as everyone stared at the young woman who had emerged from the shimmering light. She stood there, her face an exact mirror of Adana's, her expression a mixture of sadness and relief. Adana's heart pounded as she took a hesitant step forward, her voice trembling. "Who are you?" The girl looked at her with tears in her eyes. "I am your twin sister." The weight of her words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Chinwe gasped, covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Okechukwu, stunned, looked from the transformed girl to his wife, searching for answers. Before anyone could speak, Adaobi dropped to her knees, her face pale and her eyes wide with guilt. "It's true," she whispered, her voice shaking. "She is your sister, and this is my doing." All eyes turned to Adaobi. Chinwe's shock gave way to anger, her voice trembling as she demanded, "What are you saying, Adaobi? What do you mean this is your doing?" Adaobi looked at the ground, unable to meet their eyes. "I was jealous," she began, her words faltering. "I was jealous of you, Chinwe. All my life I envied you. You were always the beautiful one, the one everyone admired. When you got married to Okechukwu and I remained alone, I was angry and bitter. But when you became pregnant, something inside me snapped." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "I went to a witch doctor in Umuwaka. I begged her to curse your baby. I wanted you to suffer as I had suffered. When you gave birth to Adana, a beautiful, healthy baby, I thought the curse had failed. I convinced myself that you had somehow used witchcraft to protect your child." Adaobi's voice broke as tears streamed down her face. "When Adana told me about the snake that had been following her, I returned to the witch doctor. She revealed the truth to me. The curse had worked, but not in the way I had expected. You had twins, Chinwe. One was born as Adana, and the other was born as the snake." Gasps filled the clearing. Adana's legs felt weak beneath her as she turned to look at her mother. "Twins?" she whispered. "Mama, is this true?" Chinwe, her face pale and her hands trembling, sank to the ground as sobs racked her body. "Yes," she admitted through her tears. "It's true." Okechukwu stepped forward, his voice firm but filled with confusion. "Chinwe, what are you saying? You gave birth to a snake?" Chinwe nodded, her tears falling freely. "The day you were born, Adana, was both the happiest and the most terrifying day of my life. After I gave birth to you, I felt the pain again. I thought I was having another child, but what came out was a snake." The others listened in stunned silence as Chinwe continued, her voice breaking. "I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid of what the villagers would say, afraid they would call me a witch or harm our family. So I made a decision, a terrible decision. While everyone was celebrating your birth, Adana, I took the snake into the forest and left it there. I buried the memory deep in my heart and never spoke of it again, not to your father, not to anyone." Okechukwu stared at his wife, his face a mixture of shock and sorrow. "Chinwe, why didn't you tell me?" "I was afraid, Okechukwu," Chinwe sobbed. "I thought I was protecting us, but I see now that I only created more pain." Adana turned back to the young woman, her twin, who had remained silent, her eyes filled with tears. "You're my sister," Adana said softly. "All this time you've been protecting me." The twin nodded. "Yes, I was drawn to you, even though I didn't fully understand why. I didn't want you to go through what I had suffered. Adaobi, still kneeling, spoke again, her voice trembling. When I realized the snake was your twin, I was terrified that the truth would come out. I begged the witch doctor for a way to end it. She told me that the snake had to die to keep the secret hidden. That's why I told you, Adana, that it needed to be killed. I thought I could bury my shame once and for all, but I never expected your blood to transform her. Chinwe looked at Adaobi with a mixture of anger and pity. Your jealousy caused so much pain, Adaobi. You cursed an innocent child and tore this family apart. Adaobi sobbed. I know. I was wrong, and I will carry this guilt for the rest of my life. But now the truth is out, and there's no undoing what I've done. The twin stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. The truth is painful, but it is also freeing. I only wish we could have known each other sooner, Adana. Adana reached out and took her twin's hand, her own tears falling freely. We have each other now, she said, and we will heal together. Okachukwu placed a hand on Chinwe's shoulder, his voice steady. This family has been through enough pain. It's time for healing. The clearing was quiet as the family, for the first time, began to process the truth. Though the road ahead would not be easy, they knew they could face it together. The forest clearing remained eerily quiet as everyone processed the shocking revelations. The young woman who now stood before them as Adana's twin wiped away her tears and finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. My name is Chika, she began, her eyes meeting Adana's. And for as long as I can remember, I have lived in the forest. I didn't know who I was or why I existed the way I did, but I felt a pull toward you, Adana. Something deep inside me told me that we were connected. Adana held her sister's hand tightly, her own tears flowing freely. Why didn't you show yourself before now? Chika sighed. I couldn't. I was bound by the curse placed on me. Your blood helped me transform. I could only act as a guardian, protecting you when you were in danger. That's why I was always there when you needed me. She paused, her expression growing somber. And that is why I had to intervene during your betrothal ceremony. Adana, Obinna was not the man he pretended to be. Adana's brows furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? Obinna was deceitful, Chika said firmly. He didn't love you. He only wanted to marry you to win a bet he had made with his friends. He boasted that he could win your heart and then abandon you once the marriage was complete. I couldn't let that happen. You deserve better. Adana's breath caught as the weight of Chika's words sank in. She had been so captivated by Obinna's charm that she had overlooked any signs of his true intentions. Her heart ached, but at the same time she felt grateful for her sister's intervention. Chika continued, her voice trembling slightly. I have watched over you for years, Adana. Protecting you was all I could do, but now that the curse has been lifted, I finally feel free. As the sisters embraced, their emotional reunion was interrupted by the sound of voices in the distance. The villagers, drawn by rumors of Adana's supposed connection to the snake, began to gather at the edge of the clearing. Whispers filled the air as they saw the twin sisters standing side by side, identical in appearance but vastly different in their journeys. There she is, someone murmured. And the snake? It's a woman? Another voice chimed in, filled with suspicion. What kind of witchcraft is this? Adaobi stepped forward, her voice firm as she addressed the crowd. It's not witchcraft. This is the truth that jealousy and wickedness tried to bury. Chika is Adana's twin sister, cursed at birth by my own foolishness. The villagers gasped, their whispers growing louder. Adaobi raised her hands to quiet them. I was jealous of my stepsister Chinwe and her happiness. My envy drove me to curse her unborn child, and this, she gestured toward Chika, is the result of my actions. It is my fault, and I will carry this guilt forever. Chinwe, her eyes filled with tears, stepped forward. And I too share the blame. When I gave birth to Chika, I was so afraid of what people would say that I abandoned her. I thought I was protecting my family, but I see now that I only caused more pain. The villagers listened, their expressions softening as they began to understand the depth of the family's struggles. Finally, Chika spoke, her voice strong and clear. I am not here to harm anyone. I only wanted to protect my sister, who has shown nothing but kindness despite the challenges she has faced. I ask for your understanding. An elder stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of years of wisdom. This is a hard truth to bear, he said. But it is a reminder of the harm jealousy and wickedness can cause. Adaobi, you let envy consume you. Chinwe, you let fear guide your actions. And we, the villagers, let our suspicion and gossip tear a kind-hearted girl away from us. He turned to the crowd. Let this be a lesson to us all. We must not let envy and fear poison our hearts. Instead, we must embrace understanding and forgiveness. The villagers murmured in agreement, their hostility melting away as they looked at Adana and Chika with new eyes. One by one, they stepped forward to apologize for their mistrust and to welcome Chika into the community. As the sun began to set, the family stood together, finally united. Chinwe held both her daughters close, while Okechukwu rested a protective hand on their shoulders. Adaobi, though filled with guilt, promised to make amends and stand by her family. Adana looked at Chika, a smile breaking through her tears. You saved me, Chika. Not just from Obinna, but from so much more. Chika smiled back, her heart filled with a sense of belonging for the first time in her life. And now, we can face everything together. The truth had been revealed, and the pain of betrayal, jealousy, and secrets hung heavy over the clearing. As the villagers returned to their homes, their whispers of forgiveness and unity echoed through the air. But for Auntie Adaobi, there was no peace. Her confession of cursing an unborn child, driven by jealousy, could not be overlooked. The elders of both villages convened, their judgment swift and harsh. Adaobi was banished from Umuagu and Umuaka, condemned to live the rest of her days wandering aimlessly. I accept my punishment, Adaobi said tearfully as she gathered her belongings. I have wronged my family and caused harm to innocent lives. I only pray that my stepsister and her daughters can find happiness. Chinwe, despite her anger, found herself pitying Adaobi. May the gods forgive you, she said softly, as Adaobi walked away, her figure fading into the horizon. For Chika, however, the future was bright. Now free of the curse, she was welcomed into the family and the village with open arms. The villagers marveled at her striking resemblance to Adana and began to treat her as one of their own. For the first time in her life, Chika felt like she truly belonged. Chika and Adana's bond deepened as they spent time together, sharing stories and learning about each other's lives. The sisters were inseparable, their laughter filling the air as they embraced the joy of their newfound connection. Their beauty, both inner and outer, captivated everyone who met them. It wasn't long before news of Adana and Chika's beauty spread far beyond the boundaries of Umuagu. Word reached the palace, and Prince Chima, heir to the throne of Umuagu, was eager to see the girl whose beauty and kindness had become the talk of the village. When Chima first laid eyes on Adana, he was mesmerized. Her grace and radiant smile left him speechless. He approached her parents with gifts and formally declared his intention to marry her. Adana, he said, his voice sincere, your beauty is only surpassed by your kind heart. Will you honor me by becoming my wife and queen? Adana, blushing, looked at her parents for guidance. Chinwe and Okechukwu, beaming with pride, nodded their approval. With her heart full of joy, Adana accepted the prince's proposal. Meanwhile, Prince Chima's cousin and closest friend, Prince Latana of Umuaka, accompanied him on his visit to the village. When he met Chika, he was equally captivated. Her striking resemblance to Adana and her quiet strength drew him in. Chika, I see in you a beauty and spirit that is unmatched. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Chika, still adjusting to her new life, was hesitant at first. But after seeing the sincerity in Obinna's eyes and feeling the warmth of his affection, she accepted his proposal. The villagers rejoiced, thrilled by the prospect of two royal marriages uniting the kingdoms of Umuagu and Umuaka. The day of the weddings was a grand occasion, unlike anything the villagers had ever seen. Both kingdoms came together, their streets adorned with vibrant decorations and the sound of drums echoing in celebration. Adana and Chika wore identical traditional wedding attire, their coral beads glinting in the sunlight. Prince Chima and Prince Lotana stood side by side, their faces glowing with happiness as their brides were brought forward. The ceremony was filled with blessings from the elders, songs of joy, and the laughter of children. As the sun set, Adana and Chika exchanged vows with their respective princes, sealing their unions and bringing happiness to both kingdoms. Adana and Chika's marriages marked a new beginning for their family and their villages. The sisters, now queens in their own right, continued to strengthen the bond between their kingdoms. Their love for each other remained unwavering, and they often reminisced about their journey from pain to joy. The people of Umuagu and Umuaka, inspired by the sisters' love and the lessons of their story, vowed to live with greater understanding and compassion. And so Adana and Chika lived happily ever after, their love and strength bringing light to all who knew them.